Okay, so back to the beginning here. So the thing that people seem most concerned about in terms of interviewing is the jitters and kind of freaking out. And how can I get rid of the intense nervousness that I experience? And the answer is you can't. And the other part of the answer is you don't want to. If you don't have the jitters, there's something wrong with you. So jitters are okay. It's just that you want to kind of frame it in a different way. And of course, you want to manage them, not eliminate them. So you just want to accept that it's kind of like how it goes, and it's okay. And in fact, they can help you. So one thing that you can do that's really going to, aside from framing it as kind of like, instead of framing it like I'm really nervous, frame it as I'm really focused, I'm really tuned in. But the thing that you really can do that you do control is doing a bang up job on your preparation. So in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how to do that. But meanwhile, just you want to do whatever it takes to be prepared, be well prepared, and that will really do a lot for calming you down, as will a lot of practice. So, with anything that you do in, be it in the business world, in school, in sports, and music, practice is, of course, really essential and really helpful. You can certainly practice on your own. You can recruit family and friends to practice with you. You can talk to Jen, who is in contact with dozens of alumni who are always saying, if there's ever anything I can do to help students at SUNY Orange, please let me know. And this is one of the things that they can do to help students at SUNY Orange. So Jen and I and other people within the college would be happy to arrange mock interviews for you. And that's another great way to prepare. And another thing that's great, we have this thing called Big Interview on our website. You can see it on the Career Services homepage. And this is a way to actually practice on your screen. Somebody sits there and asks you questions, you can see them, and it's interactive. And it's a great way to practice as well. So those are some things that you can do to prepare. Another thing that you can do is what we call informational interviews. And this goes along with practice and preparing. These are interviews that are not to get a job, but to gather information. And you really need to know about informational interviews. It's a really awesome tool to have at your disposal. So again, our alum are happy to do these things with you. And if you want to know more about informational interviews, you should Google it or YouTube it. Or one of my favorite websites is careersherpa.net. And Hannah Morgan is her name. And she's a guru of all this stuff. She has some great things on there about informational interviews. This is not only one of the best things you can do to prepare for an interview, it's one of the best things you can do to network and look for a job. Don't, again, be too concerned about being nervous. I don't know if people still do this. When I was a kid, we used to like shake a bottle of Coke like this with a thumb over the top and then just watch it spray, And it's kind of like that in terms of appearances. It's like you can be all worked up inside, but yet on the outside, you can look just like this woman who's smiling and being calm. And so, we always think, oh my God, they're going to see how nervous I am. But there's sort of this phenomenon that really, usually they can't tell. And especially if you act confident, there's very little difference between somebody who is confident and somebody who's acting confident. Another thing that's very sort of relaxing and calming in this process is to have a few irons in the fire. I know in my own career, I've had times where I had one prospect for my next career move, and it makes it very highly charged. So best case scenario, get a few irons in the fire. Another thing that you can do, and if you can't, that's okay, but if you can, all the better. View it as a process, not as this really intense event, and kind of look at it as, okay, I'm going to do my resume. I'm going to get some informational interviews. Oh, I got an interview. Great. Now I'm going to prepare for it. Oh, now I'm going to the interview. And so that way, it's not like this one event. It's just a step in the process. A lot of people have rituals, whatever works. I mean, some people like to meditate or center themselves. That can be great. Personally, I have a little ritual that really works for me. When I started playing music professionally, I was in my 20s. That was a long time ago. And I wasn't really that good. And I didn't really have that much experience, but I had gigs. And so, of course, I was very nervous when I was going to these gigs. And so I developed this ritual. This was, I won't tell you how many years ago, of jumping up and down 10 times. I would just jump up and down. I'd go in the men's room or out the back of the club, outside in the parking lot. And that was my little ritual. Well, you know, time passed. I got a lot more experience. I got a little better at it. And I didn't really need the ritual anymore. But to this day, every time I'm going to do a gig, I jump up and down 10 times because it just kind of gets me. It's like, oh, now I'm going to play music. And that's what I do to get in that frame of mind. So whatever works for you, maybe you want to jump up and down 10 times. Maybe you want to meditate. But whatever it is, it's all good. So another way to frame it is, I'm going to take some time off. So if you're freaking out, okay, I'm freaking out. I'm going to put my freaking out in a little box at the side of the room and just leave it there while I go and do this interview. And then when I'm done doing the interview, I'll freak out some more. But just see it as kind of, again, just taking a little time off. Make a good entrance. That's really important. Confidence, big smile, enthusiasm. Again, you're going to act like this regardless of how you feel. Another thing to keep in mind is, you know, you're a little nervous. The person interviewing you is a little nervous too, because it's kind of a highly charged situation. So they will really appreciate it if you, for example, notice something on their desk or on the wall or whatever, and just start a casual conversation. It's a great way to relax you, and it's a great way to relax them too. I have a friend, a musician friend. He's a guitar player. He's also a CEO. And I was in his office one day and I saw that he had a guitar on a guitar stand in his office. And I said, oh, do you like practice when you're working? And he said, oh, no. It's just that I do interviews in here and I like to have something around to talk about or for somebody else to talk about to just kind of break the ice. So yeah, anything like that is great. Again, some people like deep breathing, whatever it is, it's all good. Remember that sometimes when we're nervous, we get a little wordy. And so you definitely want to keep that in mind. And, you know, less is more. Definitely don't cut them off when they're talking and don't interrupt. Okay, so that's some things that you can do in preparation that will help you. This is Hannah Morgan's 10-step job interview prep checklist. I think it's great. So a big thing that you want to keep in mind is it's not all about you, it's about them too. So you definitely want to tie whatever you're doing to the job description and what they're looking for. Make sure you have a little bit of information, a little story for each of the major job requirements. Well, when I was doing this, this is something that really worked for me. Prepare answers to the things like, why should we hire you? Talk about your strengths and weaknesses. Sometime when you had a big challenge, what did you do? How did you handle? Things like that. You're also going to want to definitely have a very well-prepared answer to, so tell me a little bit about yourself. And we'll get to that in a minute because that's a really important one. So you also want to research the company, be all over their website, and you also want to research the people who you're going to be interviewing with. You want to know a little bit about them, or, you know, you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Facebook, you can go on the company website, but definitely very beneficial to have some information like that. You're going to be judged, evaluated, and Johnny M may talk a little bit more about this, by the questions that you ask. So make sure that you make a point to come up with some really interesting, well thought out questions. That'll really help you. Know what's going to happen. Know who's going to be there. Know how it's going to be conducted. And it's perfectly appropriate for you to ask those questions. In the days before COVID, when we used to go physically to interviews, you would want to bring copies of your resume. COVID will be over one day, and or at least under control, and we'll probably be doing interviews in person again. And so just something to keep in mind. You do not want to spend the morning of the interview spending an hour and a half trying to figure out what to wear. And if you're like me, you're ironing your shirt right before you put it on. So, get all that stuff prepared and know how you're getting there again if you have to go somewhere. On time equals late. 15 minutes early equals on time. So you definitely want to be on the early side. And something that trips people up sometimes is when they get asked about specific employment dates. So make sure you kind of have that handy. You can have your resume handy, of course, but you're just going to want to know those dates. Okay, so that's the prep. And now back to that question that you're almost definitely going to get asked. And just don't hear it as, tell me about yourself. Hear it as, why should we hire you? Because they don't really want to know all about you. What they want to know is, why should we hire you? Remember that you've got the entire interview to expand on things. So don't try to get everything in that 1 minute. And that's about what you want, is a minute or less. Again, tie it to the job description. Focus on skills and experience relevant to the job. Tie it to the company. Again, not just about you in relation to them. You don't want to run through your work history. They can see that from looking at your resume and talking to you. But what you do want to run through are things like this, where you're talking about value for them. So these are things that you can really be focused on. Just like your opening, entrance, you want to make sure that you practice this. Good energy. You want to be enthusiastic. You want to be upbeat, positive, and you definitely want to be smiling, and you definitely want to end this little blurb with a smile. Okay, so a few other things to keep in mind. Don't try to be something you aren't. Don't try to convince them you're something that you're not. Believe me, they'll know. And Johnny Ann can talk a little bit more about that. She does this all the time. But just be straight with them. They appreciate it when you're straight with them, and they don't appreciate it when you try to BS them. If you need a minute to think about an answer, a pause is a whole lot better than, then, you don't want any of that. So it's okay to pause, and it's even okay to tell them, let me think about that for a minute. And then another little trick that if you do need a minute is ask a question. Ask a question and don't really listen to the answer. Think about, what you want to think about. So that's how you can buy yourself a little time. When it's over, don't be afraid they want people that want them. So they want to hire somebody who really wants to be there. So don't be afraid to tell them if that's how you feel. And again, just like the entrance, you want the exit to reflect good body language, big smile and enthusiasm. If they don't tell you, be sure to ask, what are the next steps? That's, again, entirely appropriate, and you want to know. And also, you want to know the timeline, and remember that they are running a business. And this whole hiring thing may only be like 5% of what they're dealing with, whereas it may be like 80% of what you're dealing with. So keep in mind that it will often take them longer than they tell you or than they think. And even in a best case scenario, it'll probably be longer than you'd like. So just keep that in mind and be patient. And then to wrap it up, of course, you want to send a thank you note. And again, Johnny Ann will tell you more about this, but it can be handwritten, it can be an email, it can be both. If you do both, I would send a brief email like an hour or two later, like just as soon as you can. Just thanks, great talking to you. I'm going to be following up. I'm going to be sending you a letter, but I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today. And then your actual thank you should be, paragraph 1 is thank you. Paragraph 2 is not about thank you. Paragraph 2 is an opportunity to do a sell job. So reinforce why you're so good for them. And also it's an opportunity to clear up anything from the interview that you want to clarify. If you had vibes that they didn't like one of your answers or didn't like something, there's an opportunity to address that. If you said something and felt like, gee, I wish I had said this, again, opportunity to kind of clarify things. And then paragraph 3 is all about humility, just humble gratitude. And that's a great way to end it. And that's the way we're going to end my entire presentation. And so I would be happy to address any questions if you have questions now, or we can take care of that after Johnny ends as well. But feel free to put anything in the chat if there's anything you want to do now.
Hey, Don. Don, I'm just going to interrupt you. We did have one question that came through while you were speaking, and I apologize that I didn't catch it more of what you were talking about, but you were speaking about having a few irons in the fire. And I know that that's maybe a term that some of us haven't heard before. So if you could just maybe explain a little bit more about what you meant by having a few irons in the fire. That was a question that came through.
Okay, again, a great way to have a few irons in the fire, meaning a few explorations that you're doing in terms of getting a job. You don't want to put all your eggs in this one basket. If nothing else, it makes it a little more stressful when you only have one option. So very good if you can have a few options. And again, a great way to feel and to actually develop a few options is informational interviews. So again, be talking to Jen, be talking to me, be talking to people who can connect you to other people who can talk to you. So you don't need to necessarily get job interview other options, but at least get some informational interview other options, some exploring other options, which will lead you to job interviews.
I'm feverishly writing my notes and trying to think of all the things to just add. I mean, that was a lot and almost everything you need in one way or another. But I only see, not a lot of faces, but I'm curious if after hearing any of that, if any of you are like exhausted, right? Like that's my thought, right? I just think not listening to you personally, Don, but just the thought of going through all this. It is looking for a new job, changing jobs, just starting out, switching paths. I mean, it is stressful, right? And it's a lot to do. And then, we have at least 10 steps. And that isn't even including before you even get to the interview phase, right? You have to like apply for so many jobs and not hear back from so many people. And it's just, it beats you up a little bit. And it knocks you down, right? You start to question your confidence and you start to think like, why isn't anyone answering me? And when am I going to hear? And I really wanted that job. And why didn't they want me? So I'm hoping to kind of just chat a little bit from the other side of the table. So Don and Jen introduced me. I'll just give you a little bit more information. So before working for the Council of Industry, I worked as an executive recruiter and a trainer for a local financial institution. And in one way, formally or informally, I have been for more years than I'd like to admit on the hiring side of the application process. I have also, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a human, you're human, I'm human, right? I've also been on the other side. I've had to walk into the interview and I've had that knot in the pit of my stomach about how this is going to go. So I have a little bit of that in my natural background. Currently, as the person in charge of workforce for the Council of Industry, we are a manufacturing association. We help over 100 manufacturing companies in the Hudson Valley. And my role is to help them think about their current and future workforce needs. So that's filling the positions that are available right now and strategizing about what's coming up down the line and how to create programs around that. So I now get to talk to hiring managers and CEOs and just, people in the field about what they're looking for and why they're having such a hard time finding that. And what's interesting is anecdotally, we have a job board and I see over 175 jobs posted. And I see over a 1,000 candidates a month. But then those jobs are still open, right? So there's this gap, right? There's jobs that aren't filled, and there are people who aren't getting the jobs. And sometimes it's just, who really has that particular skill set, and the market's so small. And sometimes it's just, a matter of fit. And I was thinking when Don and Jen talked to me about this, like, if I'm on your side of this Zoom screen today, what would I like to hear? So I'm going to share with you some thoughts from the hiring perspective from the company. Don shared a little bit about this from the hiring manager, like what's behind the curtain? What are they really thinking when they're sitting across the table from you? A little bit about self-awareness, do's, don'ts. A little bit, I hope to touch on some digital job interviews, because that's what we're doing now, a lot of Zoom interviews, and what's the same and what's different, and how maybe that's actually going to be something good for you. Perhaps that's a possibility. I want to answer the questions I get most frequently. So in addition to my work, I work as an adjunct professor, and I see, college students every day, not every day, but every day, who are asking me questions. And, I want to help with some of those things that I get, the like top 5 questions that people ask me. And then if there's time, and we obviously hope to have time for questions, I'll just give you what's worked for me. Right? It may not work for everybody, but it's worked for me. So I'll start with, I have this thought that comes to my head a lot, that it's just like, what's the point, right? Like, why are we going through this whole process? Why does it matter if we take all of Don's suggestions and we put so much effort into it? And I'll tell you, it's because Don said, that person may only spend 5% of their time hiring. Right? If you think of an organization, and, we could think big or small, they want to either make product or provide service. They want to provide value. That's what they want to do. The employer is looking to provide value. They also have to hire people. That isn't their primary goal, right? So when you get to the point of walking into an interview, it's important to be prepared and to take it seriously, because for them, time is money. Right? So I'll tell you what the employer wants. I'm sure you've heard this over and over again, but just in case, they want someone who wants to be there. They want someone who's reliable, who can show up, who can do a good job. The things that we get in the weeds on, the specific answers, am I good enough for this? Am I good enough for that? That all matter too, but they really are looking for someone who's good. They're going to be proud that they hired, that's going to be a good fit, and that's going to want to contribute. Now, depending on where you are in your life cycle, you may be at the phase of just starting out and maybe needing to take whatever opportunity presents itself. And I think Don was saying about the many irons in the fire, right? You may not even know. You may be a little further in your career where you already know, I don't want to do this and this, but this is the direction I want to go. All of that comes into play, right now, and as time moves forward. When you sit with the hiring manager, just to give you some thoughts about what goes through my head when I'm about to interview someone. Number one, if you're meeting with someone face to face or on Zoom, just assume they are very busy, right? They are probably overloaded. They have probably posted multiple jobs. They have hopefully on their end got hundreds of resumes. They have already filtered through. They've made dozens of phone calls. They've wrote up their questions. They have, I guarantee you, finished another meeting 4 minutes before walking in to meet with you, right? So they're busy. And that's why the time you can put in up front to be prepared and to do a good job matters. The other thing I think is good to know, I think we start to think that people want to trick us. They want to see us stumble. They want to say, gotcha. But realistically, these hiring managers really want to fill the job. That's what they want. That's what gets them from point A to point B. So they're coming in with their fingers crossed, right? They've already seen your resume. Hopefully they've talked to you on the phone. They've confirmed the appointment. They're at the point where they're walking in saying, I really want this to fit. So I don't think that, now that's not the case with everybody. Someone might say, let me make sure that that's not the case. But they are really looking forward to this working, and they're trying to find that to be the case. They also want to make sure that this is a good use of their time. Now, on my end, one of the things I am always bothered by is that first question, Don, maybe tell me about yourself, or, what do you know about the position? Or what do you know about this organization? Or what has you interested in applying for a job? What caught your interest about this position? I like it when someone has a bit of information. Now, I'm going to give you my personal tip about this. I don't want you to memorize everything about my organization. I want you to go on the website, read a little bit, and jot down 3 things. Just 3 things. And make them be accurate. And for me personally, when I interview, I physically write them down. 3 things I noticed about your organization. And I answer that question to say, I did a little bit of research online. I realized that you're headquartered here, that you've been available for this long, that these are your core values, and I am really looking forward to learning more. Now, it's a bit of a turnoff for a hiring manager when someone tries to impress you that I just know everything about everything about everything. Because unless you're right on, it's kind of like, well, wait a second. Well, why don't you let me tell you a little bit? So it's a weird balance between we want you to tell us what you know to show me that you did a little bit of your homework. But on the other side, I don't want you. I have had somebody say to me, well, I know that this is a very large organization. And they're like, there's literally 2 of us who work here. Right? So you're trying to impress me, but it's not an accurate statement. So I do this very specifically. I write down 3 things. And I plan on saying, I don't know a lot about your organization. I did my research. I saw these 3 things that stuck out, but I am eager to learn more. So that's kind of, my tip as to how that process can come along. So when I'm a hiring manager, I want to see that you've put a little thought into that. And just a little bit to tie into Don's points, I don't need you to go back to the beginning. I once interviewed somebody, we hired him. He was great, stuck around for a while, but he was in his mid-70s. And when I said, tell me a little bit about yourself, he said, well, I got my paper route when I was 12. And I was like, we don't need to go back to 12, right? So I think Don's point about what's the level of concise that you need to be, right? It's this tricky little balance. And I love your point, Don, where you said, this is just the intro, right? You're going to have the whole interview to answer questions and tell them that. And hopefully at the end, make sure that you've got all those pieces. So when I'm thinking about it from the hiring manager's perspective, those are the things I'm looking for, that you're respecting my time enough to do a little bit of research, but you don't need to know everything about everything. And that you want to learn, you want to know, you want to ask some questions. So the other thing I think is good to know is your own sort of self-awareness of how you are in this process. So I couldn't agree with you more about the informal or informational interviews, discussions with people. I am a firm believer in this concept. It's not my concept. It's from a book with the proximity principle. So if you'd like to get a job in marketing, find someone who's in marketing and ask them some questions, right? Many years ago, I was taking a job that I thought was I was applying for a job that I thought was a little out of my realm. And I went to my little network of people I knew, and I reached out and I said, hey, does anybody know somebody who's doing this already? And I met with that person and I said, what are the hot topics? What should I know? What am I missing? Those are the kinds of things you can do. And I actually think you can do that better in this new Zoom environment. I think it's actually easier for you in this environment. And I'll make myself available as a resource, of course, but you'd be surprised how many people actually want to take that call and have that conversation and share with you some of those pieces. Once you're in the interview, my main thought about self-awareness is not to do or draw anything that's attention to you aside from the information you want to share. So I've had people come in with gum, and you're just like the whole time just kind of watching that and thinking, oh, that's just really distracting to me. I'm a big fidgeter. That's a huge thing for me. But sometimes that comes across and you're like tapping and clicking. So just think, I just want to focus on the content of what I have to say, build a relationship with this person so that they're going to want to see me in the office or on the work site for 40 hours. Let's see. A couple of other things I wanted to say. The top questions that I get from people seeking jobs. I get this a lot, and I hope that this message comes through. I get probably more questions of like, why didn't I get that job? Like, I went on that interview, I thought it went well. I don't understand. How come they won't just tell me why I didn't get that job? Well, the reality is, they're not going to hire you, they don't need to put any more time or money into you, because they're not going to hire you. That's sad as it's true, but it's reality. Also, we live in such a litigious world that they are not going to say anything that could possibly come back. And they don't really owe you that. Thank you. There was a better, more suited candidate, right? So I have a colleague who gives this expression that just says, hey, they were looking for blue pants and you had red pants. They were looking for green pants and you had yellow pants. My personal opinion to any person who ever comes to me and says, how come I didn't get the job? My answer is, it's not personal, just wasn't the right fit. It just wasn't. You just weren't the fit for that at the time. Now, frustrating, discouraging, all those things, absolutely. But it's not personal. They don't even know you well enough to actually decide that. They just picked a different person because it was a different fit. And sometimes that happens. I have had times where I can interview both Dawn and Jen and really, really, really enjoy both of them and think they are both qualified, but I can only hire one and I have to pick one person. So it's not that I didn't like Dawn. It's just that I decided to hire Jen because that day that I thought the yellow pants were the way to go. So it feels emotional and personally attached, but I would say, take a deep breath and detach yourself a little bit from that, because, ultimately it just wasn't meant to be. If I think of the positions that I didn't get, I'm very, very thankful for that now. But at the time, I was a little less thankful. Why don't I hear back? That's just frustrating. It's just frustrating. However many applications you put out there. I mean, we have interns that come through here. We have young students that we talk to. We have, adults transitioning who say, like, I've applied for 15, 20, 30, 45 jobs. I don't hear anything. It's just an unfortunate process. It's where technology has kind of bit us in the butt with all these applicant tracking systems. And maybe you applied for a job and they decided to just look at the first 30 resumes and you were like 35, and it just happens that way. So it's unfortunate that happens, but again, I don't think it's personal. A lot of times people ask me, when is it appropriate to follow up? So I would say once you've submitted your resume, it's appropriate to follow up a couple of weeks after. And after your interview, I think Dawn's point is ask that question, right? What's the next steps? When should I expect to hear from you? Cut them some slack, because whenever anyone asks me that question, I'll say, we were really hoping to have this wrapped up in a week or so. But the reality is, as soon as I say that out loud, little elves work to make sure that never happens, right? So it's not as quickly as you think it is. But if they give you a timeline, if they say, we're looking by the end of next week, I would give them 4 days and then follow up after that. It's appropriate. I get that, but you don't want to be nudgy. The other thing I wanted to say, was just a lot of times people ask, why did they ask that particular question? And I think Dawn really went deep into why they're asking those questions. The tell me about yourself isn't because they really want to know, if you played soccer in middle school. It's because they want to know if you're a good fit for this position. So I have some other personal tips, but I think we'll get those in the questions. Did you say that there's
the question that I had presented to me before the workshop was, how are employers interviewing candidates during this pandemic?
Yeah.
Is it a combination of online and in-person interviews?
Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot of Zoom interviews. I think that at least first round interviews are typically being done that way for a lot of people. But also, I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Sorry. We're also seeing some job fairs that are drive-through. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but there's a new movement to that where you can drive up, get the information, fill it out, do like a very quick mask to mask screening. So we're seeing a bit of that. But in my experience, I'm seeing a lot more first interviews through Zoom, and then perhaps a second interview socially distanced. in that environment. I would also just say the Zoom interviews are kind of interesting because you have the ability to like upload stuff almost right then. You know how Don said, share your resume. You can do that. You can say, if it's okay with you, I'm going to share my resume through that. And also, we did a Zoom interview recently for a marketing position, and she offered. She said, "Would you be interested in seeing some of my work?" And that was a great experience. So we were able to say, yeah, that worked out great, and allowed her to do that. So I'm seeing a bit of a blend, and I think it depends on the position. If you are physically going into a facility, they need you to see it, to know what you're going into. But if they can avoid, having to interview 10 people in person and just 2, then I think that's what I'm seeing. And I don't know, Don, do you see or hear anything different on that?
Well, I'm seeing very much what you're saying, consistent with what you said. I think, of course, everybody's being cognizant of the virus, and so they're not looking for opportunities to interact with people face to face, especially in a non-social distance, manner. So yeah, most of the people that I'm working with in the employer community are doing a lot of screening, just through whatever means they normally do, and then doing Zoom interviews. I think if you want to look at some kind of typical stats, let's say they post a job, you may get, let's say, 100 resumes. Again, Johnny Ann could address this better than I could as far as, because she does this, but I would say ballpark, they're going to try to get that pile down to about 15, as fast as possible. They're going to eliminate anything with a typo. They're going to eliminate anybody who's totally, not right. And then they'll seriously look at maybe half of them and be looking for the best 15 maybe. And they're not going to interview 15 people. They will probably only interview 3 or 4. So that seems to me to be kind of a typical paring down, is 100 to maybe 50 to 15 to 3 or 4.
Yeah, which is why it's so frustrating, right, to put your resumes out there and not get to that point. I think we didn't really touch on this, Jen, and I'm sorry because I know you have something else. But I think even if you don't have a network, the idea of networking is super important. So if you apply for a job at an organization and you can find someone else who works at that organization, that helps. If you are interested in a job at an organization and you could kind of just say, hey, do you know anybody who works there? Because I just put in my resume, that those things help. I mean, it's sometimes it's not ideal. I mean, I could see why it's not great, but we very regularly appreciate a recommendation or a referral from somebody that we know.
Yeah, I think Johnny Ann makes a great point. And another thing that I've noticed is, especially at the beginning of your career, I think we're all a lot more comfortable kind of sitting behind the computer and sending out resumes and having chats and whatever. That's a lot safer, a lot more comfortable, a lot more in the comfort zone than actually getting out there and meeting with people. But that's what you got to do. And even if it's virtually now with the COVID situation, I mean, I've had students who really wanted to work at, for example, Orange Regional. We have a lot of RN grads, and they tend to be real solid citizens and really on it and really trying to get hired. I've had RN grads go and hang out in the Orange Regional cafeteria and just hang out and just start looking to meet people. And, one thing leads to another. And then somebody will say to the HR person, hey, I just met this person. This is her resume. Maybe you want to take a look at it. So all kinds of good things happen once you start networking.
Yeah, and it's not specifically the interview part to say this, but the job seeker role in general. I mean, we are all like 6 degrees away from someone who does something somewhere, right? So I would always say to anybody who's seeking a job to start to jot down their own little distribution list, people that they've mentioned, and they said, hey, if you ever need something, you let me know. Hey, if you ever need something, you let me know. You get a list of 3, 4, or 5 different people. And then when you start doing it, send that message out. Hey, everybody on my little dream team, if you know somebody who works here, if you wouldn't mind giving me 10 minutes to just practice some of my questions, I think that would be good.
Yeah, I think, again, Johnny Ann's point is so well made, because look at the odds. If you mail out your resume to in response to a job posting, let's say they get 100 resumes. So all things being equal, your odds are 1%. You got a 1% chance of getting that job. Yeah, all things being equal. Whereas if you start doing informational interviews, the stats nationally, this is a fact. The stats are nationally, for every 12 informational interviews you do, you get one job offer. Personally, in my own experience at the college, I'd say it's more like 1 in 6 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So your odds are so much better by networking.
Yeah. And Jen, was there any other questions that came up that we didn't see?
There weren't any more questions that came in through the chat. We do have about 5 minutes left on the clock. So if
I
anybody
have
has
something,
questions or if you have
sorry.
any last minute pointers,
Okay.
that would be great as well.
I do. I had something that I thought, I wish that somebody had given me this like very direct advice earlier on. So a lot of times people, Don says, everyone will say this too, you have to have questions, right? You have to have questions ready to ask the interviewer when they say, do you have any questions for me? And I'll tell you that from my own personal experience, we used to have a form, and the form says, how interested is this candidate? And if it says they asked a lot of questions, they asked some questions, they asked no questions. Now, doesn't really mean you're not interested, but you didn't ask the question. But people always ask like, yeah, but what questions to ask? And am I going to be able to think on the fly during that interview? So I will tell you what my formula is. Again, I always go in with, notepad, some things written down, including the person I'm meeting with, the phone number of that person in case something goes weird, all that stuff. And I write down 3 questions in advance before I even go to the interview. So I have those questions to ask them. And I always think I'm going to ask a company question, a job specific question, and an interviewer question. That's my method. Now there's other methods, right? So the company question might just be, how have things changed since you've been here at this company, or where do you see the next couple of years going, or something about the organization. What's the culture? Anything about the organization. My question about the job is a very specific job. Maybe it's, can you tell me what a typical day is like? Or can you tell me if I were hired, what would be the first thing I should focus on? Or what does someone in this job do successfully? Something about the job. And then the interviewer, I think, one of the things you want to do is find a way to connect with this interviewer. I think Don's point about the guitar, there's something on the desk. This is that chance. So you have a person who already works there who's spending 45 minutes with you. Why not just say, Don, this interview has been great. Do you mind if I ask you just, what do you like best about working here? Or what advice do you have for new people starting out at a job like this? Or, how has things changed for you since you've been here? I mean, I think those are some good pieces of that information. And then, if you get that, if you can ask a question to the interviewer about themselves and their experience there, about the job and about the company, you kind of have it all covered. And I would write the questions down and say to them, I jotted down some questions. Let me go ahead and look at these questions. Oh, it looks like you've answered those, but it'll at least appear that you're ready. That's my tip. That's just what I wish somebody would have told me until I figured it out on the other side.
That reminds me of a great question for in an informational interview is, what's something that you wish you had known when you started your career?
Yeah.
And there's a guy named Jeffrey Gitomer. He wrote the Little Red Sales book. He's a marketing sales guy, but he has great stuff in terms of job interviewing and how to conduct an interview.
But what's the answer, Don? What did you wish that they would have told you?
I think that one thing that I learned pretty quickly, but that I wish that I knew, nobody really seems to get very far by just doing their job. I mean, the people who I've known who have been really successful, they don't do like necessarily a 40-hour work week. And it's not just about the hours, but it's like, they don't look at the clock. They don't look at what's required. They look at what they have to do to be the best.
I'm going to give you my opinion. I wish that someone would have told me that people want to help. I was just stubborn, and I'm still stubborn, but I'm stubborn differently. But I now know how many people, you and Jen and the Career Center and the school, the alumni, I mean, business people just genuinely are not as opposed to helping you as you think. And you don't have to go it alone, because there's advice out there. People want to help. I had no idea. I thought.
And now you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah. And actually, Jen, are you comfortable if I put my contact information?
Absolutely, Johnny Ann.
All right, I'll go ahead and do that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I also put Don's email in the chat if there's anybody that would like to follow up with him after the workshop today. He's got some great resources, some great information. If anybody wants to take advantage of that, definitely do so.